Hey, Sabrina, thank you for coming in. You just have such a marvelous background, one of great accomplishment, awards, patents, leadership in different organizations, the best top organizations in the world, and just continuing to contribute in so many different ways. So, thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Such an honor.
So Sabrina, because you got this marvelous career and it's continuing and it's won a global contribution, what are the three inflection points in your life that made this wonderful person you are today? And it could have been when you were 3 or 5 years old. It could have been inside of outside of school, inside outside of family. It could have been challenges that you had early in your life, etc. But those defining moments that really shaped you and who you are.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I think I will probably mention the three different phases of my life. But I have always been a trailblazer, as you will see those inflection points in my life reflecting that. One critical point is when I entered this gifted and talented program. But that was back when I was 13 years old, when I was in Taiwan, and there was no girls in that particular gifted and talented program back in Taiwan. So I was one of the seven girls, only seven girls in a 3,000 boys schools, because at that time they still only have the gifted and talented program for girls. So ever since then, I realized that if we want something, we need to go in there and create the path ourselves, right? So no one else will create that for you. So for me, I'm very used to being there, being the first in an area. And I sort of opened my mind saying that there's no limitation here, right? Only the sky is the limitation of your imagination. If you have a path you want to go for, it's actually good that no one is there before because you will be the first one to make the marks. Yeah, so that experience taught me that I'm the first Girl Scout in the Boy Scouts school, and we actually did a bunch of first a lot of things we did there are the first times ever. We created a whole workshop and teaching cooking, right? At the time, they still think girls need to cook. So we actually have a whole building built for us just for cooking. But then later, the boys learned that they love cooking too. So we sort of bring that culture in and then started to get each other realized and inspired. I love that experience. And that teach me a lot. So that went to my second inflection point here when I entered the field of computer science. Again, that was when I was still in Taiwan, and I don't know if you are familiar with Asian culture. Sometimes parents love to have their kid to go to medical school. So when I tell them I'm not going to medical school, I'm going to computer science, they are furious. The Asian parent type, right? So I sort of had to put myself to go down that path. And I have some self-doubt myself, even though the society is still leaning towards the other path. And I want to create this path for myself. I want to do this. And I see the need of going to AI. That was way before ChatGPT. That's actually starting from when I was 16 years old, when I read those textbooks of AI from Terry Winograd and for computational linguistics. That sort of inspired me wanting to do computer science. So I have to find a path for myself there. But I did testing. At that time, computer science is not the top major, it's the second highest ranks in the entrance exam, but I test in and then starting from there to create my own path. And sort of now everybody reflecting back, right? It's such an obvious choice. Why not computer science? But back then it was such a strange choice for especially for girls. So but I'm glad I did that and create that path. Yeah, and then that led to my whole career from there, right? So I have to tailor that path for myself because I also not just want to do computer science, I want to do human-computer interaction and the combination of human-computer interaction and natural language processing. So at that time, it was also quite new. That was just the starting point of machine learning started getting introduced to computational linguistics. Before it was all rule-based system, expert systems. And now people seeing the need of using data to drive the creation of models. And then from there to make sure that when we teach computer about something, computer can understand human languages, but yet also human values. I want computer to be able to interact with humans, not just by understanding the language, but also being able to interact naturally. And that actually requires a lot of learning of human values as well. And at that time, yeah, it's either computer science or social science, right? But in this combination of social science, computer science, we also need to find our way through and create that program. So I'm one of the pioneers in this area to do that in the intersection of both. And I went to University Edinburgh, and before that I went to University California, Berkeley to do that. So I was able also to travel across continents and bring the best parts of the different part of the world together in Europe, in US, in Asia, and all together to tailor that program.
You
And
know,
that,
excuse me, that's really, really fascinating. And, you know, you were in scouted into a talent program. So I'm really curious. So in Taiwan at the time, then they had you took a test, or how did you get inducted into this program for kids who had talent?
yeah, that was the first time they opened up for girls to take that test. So we took the same test as everybody else. So that's 30, I think there are 30 of us in that talented program in that year. 7 of us are girls. We all take the same test. We didn't get preferential treatment there, but 7 girls qualify in that 30 people program. So they have to create that setting for us because it just happened to be in that 3,000 boys schools, right? Because before that, they haven't considered having girls in that program. But from there, they now have more programs in different schools that are co-ed, and girls have started to shine.
So how old were you then when you took this test?
Yeah, I think that was when I was 13 years old. Yeah, that's middle school. That was the first entry point of gifted and talented program in Taiwan back then. But ever
Wow.
since then, yeah, I've been staying in the gifted and talented program throughout. But just that before me, the girls were not given the opportunity. It was a great
Right.
program, I have to say. We got a lot of resources, privilege. I'm privileged to be there.
So what was the test like? Was it logic or math or like,
Oh, you mean back then
yeah,
in that entrance exam when I was 13 years old? Yeah, it was just like I usually very similar to like IQ tests. Yeah, before that I was already tested with a high rank IQ, but in this entrance exam they have their own setting. They have their own set of exams. So I take
right.
that again. But yeah, but that's a good opportunity. So I was hoping they could have opened it to more girls before me.
So when you're in this program, then was it hard or challenging, or what was that like with a few girls being admitted into this predominantly male-dominated program? What was that like?
Yeah, certainly very interesting stuff, right? So I still remember being the only one of the only 7 girls. We got a lot of attention, of course. We still have this general assembly every day. in that big outdoor space of the school, right? Just think about 3,000 boys all looking at these 7 girls.
Right.
Right, yeah. And teenager boys, they can be childish sometimes. So sometimes they throw things at you.
Right.
Yeah, but we
And
learn to coexist peacefully,
was was
eventually.
the was the programming hard at that school, or what kind of courses did you take at that school?
Oh, yeah. So that was the beginning of my exposure to computer science.
I see.
Yeah, so they have this computer lab. Back then, it was your basic, right? Your basic programming. But at least I got exposure and all these different algorithms they start teaching early. If I wasn't in that program, I won't have those early exposure to the computer lab and programming languages, algorithm thinking, all that. And that might delay my discovery of artificial intelligence as my passion.
Right. So that's really, really fascinating. So I can see now the link, right? So you take a test to go into this gifted and talented program. You're one of 7 girls amongst thousands of boys. But in that program, once you get in, and you're a pioneer, right? So because this is like the first path for girls into the program, though now it's more balanced, and you get exposure to computer science. They had a computer lab, things like that. So you get exposure to top tier education, and that's where you discovered computing science, and then it created this interest in AI and things like that. And as you indicated, you told your parents that, by the way, I'm not going into medicine, I'm going into computer science, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
and
that paved the way there.
yeah, and in Asian families, of course, they want like doctor, lawyer, or something like that, right?
Yeah, some step past what's
Yeah,
computer science.
yeah.
It,
Computer science is kind of like an abstract
right.
area in a way, right? So people are
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
how are you going
yeah.
to make a living at computing science, right?
It's not as lucrative as now you see computer science majors given, right? So we have to create our own path. Oh, and maybe one more fact to realize is that in Taiwan, um, the software industry is very weak. We have
Right.
all the hardware industry, right?
That's
People
true.
know
Right.
that TSMC now is the most well-known company in Taiwan, but they are very hardware driven, right? So if you are a computer science major, your best job that back then might be doing those the CMOS for those hardware, right?
Right,
And
right.
that's not what the software engineer would dream of. Yeah, but I think things change a lot since I graduate. Yeah, so actually in the year I graduate from college, that's the turning years of Taiwan software industry. A lot of my senior classmates then go into the company and started their own, and they have brought in a new wave of software engineering revival in Taiwan.
I see. Yeah. So, as you indicated, back in those days, Taiwan was very hardware centric. Taiwan Semiconductor, of course, is world renowned as a leader as a foundry. And then you talk about if you had a computing science background, you probably end up working with CMOS. And the audience may not know that CMOS is complementary symmetry metal oxide semiconductor, kind of like the fabric of these chips, right? So kind of a style of chips, and so you'd end up not working in that area. But then, as you indicated, as you're graduating from college, the whole area opened up where software became more prominent and became more important. And so you graduated from you took computing science. You went to college in Taiwan. You graduated from Taiwan. You indicated you went to Edinburgh, and Edinburgh is a really good school, by the way, out of the UK, right? It's a very stringent, like difficult doing any kind of work. And then, of course, Berkeley's very famous in the U.S. So you're talking about really two great academic centers where you indicated another part of your inflection point was there's this journey of computing science and AI, but also this human, the social part with the AI part and the human computer interaction, the human um, part of that, and that drove your interest. And I can see how that then got you into informatics and things like that. So you graduate from college so
It,
you go to the special school, you go to college in Taiwan and you
yeah.
continue your studies in computing science, and then you did your graduate work then in Edinburgh and Berkeley. How did that work?
Yeah, I did graduate in Taiwan, in National Taiwan University, one of the best in Taiwan, and especially the best computer science program there. And
Right.
then after I graduated, I did some research with our National Research Center,
Mhm.
specializing in natural language processing. So
I
I
see. Right.
mentioned those computational linguistics program, right? So back then, we are the one who created all the corpus, who can then apply those expert system rules to learn and act on, so they can we can start having the systems to understand human language,
Right.
like a customer service type, right? So you want them to be able to automatically recognize what you are saying and being able to interact back with the right information back to you, right? So those kind of things we have started very early, and that's also the beginning of natural language processing, seeing the real application in the world, because that's when Gopher started, when internet started. So they have now the search engine. We created the Taiwan search engine as well. So we can start to really make use of those information previously only see in the library. And then I came to US, to Berkeley first, where I was lucky. That was the time when internet boom started. And then I witnessed the whole internet boom when went up and then went down. And I see 101 being all traffic jam to very quiet. So I go through that cycle in the Silicon Valley with a lot of other people that's back there then. So at Berkeley, I interned in Silicon Valley a lot. So I interacted with those people and started to seeing how important AI can be, and how we need to start thinking hard about this beyond search engine. Yeah, and that's when I went into grad school to study more about human computer interactions. And then eventually that led me to University Edinburgh, which is I don't know if many people knows, but it's actually the center of artificial intelligence from the beginning. Um, Even Jeffrey Hinton himself graduated from Edinburgh in 1978. He's the godfather of AI, and that tells you how early University of Edinburgh has started in AI in that
Right.
field, right? And now when I enter, it has already become the center of the top minds of computational linguistics, and that's the transition period from expert system to machine learning, and then
Right.
eventually become the AI we are talking about today.
Right. I mean, that's a really fascinating journey. So you graduate from really the top national university in Taiwan. You work in R&D in Taiwan. You're involved in natural language processing, the search engines, and there's this kind of interfacing of the internet. You go to Berkeley. You're in Silicon Valley. You're continuing that work. And then you're at Edinburgh. And yeah, Edinburgh's a famous university, very rigorous program as well. So, and you're at, like the center of AI. So you've had such a long, I mean, you're very youthful. So somebody looking at this interview would think you're like 22, but it looks
Oh,
like,
no, no, no. Yeah, I just look young. I'm not young.
so, but your history indicates that you've been around for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed,
yeah.
indeed. And I learned all this history. I grew up with the internet, I would say.
Yeah, and in fact, because you had such an early interest in AI and then natural language processing and then the birth of the internet and the proliferation of that and how AI went from expert systems to machine learning, you saw that entire aspect of that shift from expert to machine learning. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Jeff Hinton was at Edinburgh, and then, of course, he went to the States, and then he went to U of T, University of Toronto. And, he did the early work on, in fact, he won the Nobel Prize for his work on deep learning, right? So,
In 2024, he actually won the Nobel Prize in physics with
yeah,
John Hopfield for the foundational discoveries and invention that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks. And that's
yeah,
exactly the work he studied in Edinburgh.
yeah. And then at U of T with, some really notable people. They did AlexNet and they did, Fifi Lee's
Right.
ImageNet contest, and that was really famous. And of course, that really broke open machine learning. But you being part of that whole journey as well. Um, so let's continue then your kind of career moves. Then you're in Silicon Valley. You do Berkeley. You do Edinburgh. What did you do after Edinburgh?
Yeah, so that was after I was in Edinburgh, I got the opportunity to come back to the States. I started to work in IBM Watson Research Center after my PhD, and that opened my eyes to the next phase of my career, which is to apply computer science, AI, machine learning in particular, into industrial solutions because at the time, Watson Research is interested in starting applying this general computer science stuff to certain industry solutions so we can see how these can be applied. And my field at the time I was being led into, which luckily is healthcare and life sciences. And that's the beginning of me really seriously applying what I have been doing in schools and previously in Silicon Valley into a field and trying to move the needle in that field. But this also means that we need to start to understand the whole industrial solution, the problem we are trying to solve in healthcare and industry. And that itself is very complex, a very complex landscape to navigate. So I always feel I'm doing another PhD at IBM for understanding healthcare and life sciences and how we can help this industry to solve some problems that critically needed help.
Okay, so I can see now your journey, Berkeley to Edinburgh to IBM Industrial Research Development, behavior analytics team lead. You end up there, and you get into it. Like you said, it's almost like getting a practical PhD, right?
Right.
Because you have all of this theoretical background, but now getting into application, and particularly in healthcare. So what did you do so what was your next part of your journey from IBM Industrial Research?
Yeah. So yeah, it took us a few years actually to go into that industry deep, right? As you might know, Watson Health has been created in
Right.
after we done those research in Watson Research. The executives actually want to see if they can take it to the next level by acquiring 4 companies and 2 major partnerships with companies that's specialized in that industry. So I have some experience there to start seeing how machine learning the research asset we built can be transferred into the actual products and then put it in the hands of users. So that wasn't Health era. I'm still working research, but we help with a lot of the research assets transferal work to Watson Health and then apply to the user. And that has started me to think in order to be able to make use of computer science stuff and the AI stuff to really useful things that will move the needle, we cannot just do innovation. We need to start doing productization and then eventually working on adoption so we can link this and close that last mile with the users. And that led me to the next phase of my career, which is then when I moved to smaller startup companies, when I started to work hands-on with those first, how people start to use those information that we created from AI, say that clinical decision support, right, in the hospital, in the ER, if the doctor and nurses are looking at the AI results, but without knowing how those results are coming from, they can't really trust it, right? So that productization process that we are doing and using AI for, in order for it to reach to the hands of user, need to be rethought through and need to work directly with people who are using in the workflow. So in those things, there are 3 years that I'm in the smaller startups in health AI and life sciences. That's exactly what I'm doing there in every opportunity I have to help with productization, to help with adoption, so we can start seeing those insights we generated from AI to be really useful in the workflows. And that I really learned a lot with the people on the forefront of that.
So that's really, really fascinating. By the way, I mean, at IBM Watson, and on the health side, did you work with Neil Sahota by any chance, or maybe not?
Not specifically, because we are still in research, but
Right.
we work with like Gretchen Jackson, who are helping to move those research assets into Watson Health a lot. And even today, I'm still in touch with Gretchen, and that's how I've become the leader in American Medical Informatics Association as well. I started to do more work outside my original professional setting to work on those public-private partnership in the nonprofit org like ACM and AMIA.
Okay, so let's continue this sort of chronological journey, and that is you're at IBM Industrial Research. You're getting into the analytics side of in healthcare. You then end up working with a series of startups that are on the translational side. In other words, how can we commercialize AI and the application within the healthcare area? And that got you really into the productization aspect of it, right? So realizing, let's take all of this work and let's create something useful out of it. What kind of time period were you in then? Was this?
That was just right before COVID, and saying I'm now at Pfizer, right, another big company. I think after COVID, then I come back to the enterprise world. So that's about 2 to 3 years covering the COVID period.
Okay, so what happened then is you worked for a number of startups. So and you got this sort of flavor of what it takes. When you have to be very agile in startups, and it can be kind of chaotic sometimes, right?
Yeah. And I work on various applications. One company is this consumer health app where we will send, we are doing microbiome for personalized wellness. So we will send the sample collection kit to people and then collect their, for example, fecal matters, and then start analyzing their microbiome and use it to drive the creation of their personalized wellness advice in the app, and then bring it back to the users, right? And at time, the ambition is then it can be further connected to clinical trial and even for the creation of the next generation medicine to treat oncologists and treat other IBD and other immune-related diseases. So there are a lot of potential there, but it has to start from understanding how did you connect the consumer health to that traditional healthcare setting. Usually there's electronic health records, there are clinical study sites, and all this data are dispersed into different places. So having the hands-on experience there to connect consumer health app to all these other data sources are very helpful, because then we can start seeing how we can really bring them together to move the needle. And then another example I have is in this other healthcare AI startup, which is led by A16Z. It's one of the A16Z portfolio company. And in that company, we work directly with nurses and doctors on site to see how they can use the insights we generated for clinical decision supports in their workflows. And we also work at what kind of value we can be generated directly on top, other than the AUC that show very good model performance, right? Sometimes we see model already reach 97% of accuracy, but it doesn't matter if there is one mistake made in the clinical workflow and you cannot explain, then clinician will not be able to trust you next time. So be able to navigate that barriers from the adoption side and being able to link that high performing models in real world settings and show evidence how we can really use those models to help the people on forefront in the healthcare workflows to use that and make a difference. It's very important. So I will say that those experiences really make me feel humble by how complex the whole healthcare workflows is, and but also start to really appreciating even sometimes it can be chaotic, but appreciating how when we all work together, we can make the big impact. Right? But someone need to be there on the forefront with all these people in the workflow to understand their workflow first before introducing a new technology. We need to think through it, make sure we have a way to put our AI product there in a way that will make sense in the workflow and make sense for the people who are using those workflows.
Yeah, I mean, it's you got some really practical experience, as you mentioned, on the microbiome side, but also having trusted workflow insight, and then you're working with prominent VCs like you mentioned, 16Z.
It's
Um,
Cindy and Cola, yeah, a bunch of others. So I can see how they function, how VC world is acting. That's
yeah,
another reason that drew me there in the first place. I want to know people like you, what their daily lives are like, and what they are, what
yeah,
do they see in a new company, and how do they make those investment decisions?
yeah, and in fact, 16Z or A16Z, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
A16Z is and Kozla are really top tier investors. Vinod Kozla, I mean, he's quite remarkable, right? So, did you get to meet the actual principals of those VC companies?
Yeah, yeah. When I interview, they have the partner talk to me as well. Yeah, so it's fun to see how hands-on they all are. They
Right,
really want to be on the forefront as well.
right,
And when we are there, I can say that it's really like one big family they're
right.
running. They want to make sure this is a machine. They provide a lot of back-end infra to save costs of all these startups, right? So they can do one thing very useful probably is like public relationship building part, right? So instead of each startups needing to go out to address the relationship with each press, there is a whole machine already working well and very oil or very well-oiled machines. So you can just tap on it and get your words out. And they are helping startup companies, founders, or leaders to get the media press coverage in order for them to be in the mind of the next generation investors.
So then, your next part of your journey is so your IBM, you're learning, you get it's sort of the equivalent of an industrial PhD because you get into the practicality aspect, right? And at that time, I guess Jeannie was also the chair of IBM, probably during that time period.
Yeah, that was the beginning of switching
Right.
to the current CEO. Yeah. So, you know, he used to be our research center chief, and now he's leading the whole IBM. His name is Arvind Krishna. He's the current CEO. Yeah, I couldn't remember. Oh, yeah, I think it's 2020 when we switched from Ginny to Krishna. And that's when to Arvind Krishna. Yeah, and that's when you see that IBM research started also taking some reshaping efforts to like is now to get closer to products, right? And we need to start moving research out as a pure cost center to
Right.
something that's well connected to what will be happening in the industry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a big transition from Jeannie to Arvind, and in fact, I know Arvind, so
Yeah, yeah, no, Arvind. Yeah.
yeah, and so so you do this transition to startups, and you work with top VCs, so it's a great education for you. What's the next part of your journey after, and what made you decide to go back into enterprise space?
Yeah, so now I have seen innovation, I have seen productization. I think adoption is really the key pillar. We haven't been able to work that hard on, and we should, especially if we want to take it at scale, right? So right now at Pfizer, we oversee the 500 use cases. We probably have more than 50,000 agents now running. And in that scale, you can no longer just talking about agile methodology for each one of them. You need to have a governance structure. You need to be able to use AI as an army rather than use them as a specialized agent, right? So you need to have that collective view of what's going to happen next and how you are going to manage your army so you can be strategic in the right positions when the next wave of innovation happens, and you want to be able to quickly take innovation to productization and then going through that adoption pillar to get it to the hands of users quickly. Right? So that process of how do we bring innovation back to business as usual in enterprise AI is what I'm very intrigued for. And that's why I'm now at Pfizer doing the responsible AI work, managing this portfolio, and making sure we have that responsible AI layer on top of the whole portfolio in order for us to not just making the impact, but making the impact in a safe and responsible way.
Yeah, and then now let's segue also then into you get into the ACM, Association of Computing Machinery, definitely number one in the world as a computing science, computing organization. You're involved with advisory roles with the United Nations and AI for Good initiatives. You're in the American Medical Informatics Association. You're a fellow within that, and then the international counterpart, the IMIA. So can you talk about that work? And in fact, you also have 12 patents and over 80 technical articles and invited editorships, and you published a book and et cetera, et cetera. So because I want you to talk about those briefly because I want to get into the future where you see AI going, and we're running, our clock is running down in the interview. So
Yeah. I will just quickly add that, right? So that public-private partnership part is really where my heart is at. While I'm doing all this work, I see that how AI can influence the society. And we are actually the leaders now. we cannot just sit there doing nothing. We have to take the responsibility in our hand to shape the direction of where we lead AI to in the future. So I want to be involved in center setting. I want to be involved in helping our practitioners in ACM. There are more than 100K of professional members in ACM that can be beneficial for some resources we collected for them and to help them understand the emerging trends in order for us to set that direction together. So I want to be there and devote myself to the community. It's sort of a way to contribute back as well as I have been benefiting from all the others before me to where I am today.
Yeah, in fact, with the ACM, Association of Computing Machinery, you served on the board, Professional Development Committee. You're also serving with the Bytecast Committee, which is they do podcasts. In fact, you just did one with Monica, and she's quite a famous clinician, right?
Yeah.
I think you were the host for the one with Monica, right?
Yeah. He is the incoming president of National Academy of Medicine. He was the NIH director, and before that, she was the director of National Research Center. So there are all these high positions she has held to. She's also the first woman president of National Academy of Medicine. So we are very, very excited. We had that chance to interview her. The podcast episode is coming out soon. We will certainly put a link here when it's out.
Yeah, and that's through the ACM, Association of Computing Machinery. And of course, you're embedded in the American Medical Informatics Association, where I mentioned you're an elected fellow in the international counterpart, IMIA. You also received the David O'Leary Award, which is a professionalism award from IFIP. IFIP was founded by UNESCO back in 1960. So it's an older organization. And in fact, ACM and IEEE and KIPS out of Canada are founders of IFIP. So you received a number of recognitions. What I'd like to do now is segue into things like where do you see AI going? I don't know if you've been following this thing on OpenClaw, this open source agentic system. There's something called Molt Book, which is this community for agentic systems. So where do you think this thing is going? And I should mention you've written this author of this Springer Nature published textbook, Personal Health Informatics Patient Participation in Precision Medicine, and you've been nominated by VentureBeat Women in the AI Award. So I mean, there's all of this kind of accolades for all the wonderful work you're doing. And but anyways, what do you think? What are your thoughts about AI, agentic AI? Are we in AGI already? Because if you went back 15 years ago, and if you were to describe where AI is today, 15 years ago, even Jeff Hinton would say that. He would say that, well, that's AGI.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay, so your thoughts about that in the few minutes we have left.
Okay. Yeah, I have to say this is a dream moment, the dream come true moment for every computer scientist who have been working on this in the past decade, right? We have been thinking this will happen, but I don't think any of us has predicted it happen so quickly. And now what we are seeing, you mentioned OpenClaw is the next level, right? The machine is not just thinking and it's acting on your behalf, right? And that's why you see they go into the chat room and talk among themselves, even creating a religion for themselves, because we haven't really set the guardrail and boundaries around that yet. This is what you can see as Wild West. Right.
Wild West, for sure.
Yeah, Wild West. Yeah. But before, actually, if you reflect a little bit, just a year ago, OpenAI has been trying to do that with their AutoGPT. It wasn't successful. Back then, people forgot about AutoGPT half years later, right? But now it's picking up. And I just heard OpenCloud is going to be part of OpenAI.
Right. I heard that too, but I wasn't sure if that was real or not. I hadn't taken a chance to verify. But they're going to
Yeah,
keep it open source, I think, right?
yeah, they are going to keep it open source, right? But anyway, I think the reason that's happening and that's actually predictable is that open cloud can no longer just be on its own, right? You need to start thinking about how to build these cybersecurity guardrails
Yeah, security
around,
is a big
and
issue.
and you do need to have someone who has the resources to add that
Right,
on before it got released further to the world. And
right.
usually the bigger company has resources, unfortunately, in this case, right?
Yeah,
So
the,
that's why they need to get tapped onto some bigger company to do that. But from here, the future is just starting to go into the direction everybody's talking about in this week in the Munich Security Conference. They started saying that the world is no longer in its original order, right? We are looking at this new world. We need to start considering this new reality of geopolitical power transformation as well, right? With that all coming together, that says we really need to get our whole hands onto those technologies. And I'm glad I'm part of that now, right, with this AI governance framework. We are not trying to add more regulation, by the way. This is not about regulating AI. It's about giving it embedded in or in this original the way they are operating, but with the right guardrails, with the right observability, and being able to evaluate those technologies on the fly in a way that can provide evidence so we know what's going on. And with all this setting in place, then we will feel safer to release the new technologies into the field for the whole world to adopt, right? And that's happening now. So we all need to work on this together. And there is
so
no,
can you point to resources on the AI governance? Who are you working with on the AI governance side? Are you working with the UN? Are you working in the UNESCO? Are you working with ISO, IEC? So which organizations are you working with on the AI governance side?
yeah, from the industry side, we have we are still working with this previous group, right? So we have the G7C CACC group that we used to publish the responsible AI principle together on. And in this more healthcare related world, as you have mentioned earlier, I'm working with the American Medical Informatics Association directly. We are starting an AI working group right now to start bringing those kinds of emerging technology discussion into one place so people can start monitoring where it's going specifically for healthcare. There used to be a gray area. None of the clinical decision support system actually are under regulation, not FDA, right? So that has been lobbied out intentionally before, but now as we are taking a closer look at the technologies, we want to make sure we have the right standards around it. And we need to start from our own field to set that standards for our own people. So that's the reason we are starting a new working group on this. And
Are you
because
working with
Mhm.
are you working with David Rue by any chance, the chief medical
the
officer of
yes,
Microsoft?
he yeah, he has been in our contact list. We have been in touch with Peter Lee through the Harvard DCI network. I don't know if you
Uh,
heard of them. Yeah, but in previous year, we have hosted a few conferences together, and I'm
right,
leading the real world data for the data standard for real world application there
right,
with them. When we publish, and at that time, we invited the principal scientists on Microsoft research under
right.
Peter Lee to join us to write those papers together.
Yeah, I mean, he's president of Microsoft Research and Development, right? So, and
Yeah.
then David Rue is the chief medical officer. We're actually out of time, unfortunately. I mean, um, the thing about OpenClaw on GitHub, it's the first one I think that went vertical in adoption, right?
Mm,
Usually
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
this,
yeah.
so something's really popular with the straight vertical line,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I don't know if you heard, you can't really find Mac Mini on the market anymore. If you haven't got your hands on one, you are out of luck because everyone who wants to run OpenCloud, now they are buying Mac Mini, and
yeah,
there is
yeah,
no longer anything in the inventory.
yeah, I know. It's just particularly for you, Sabrina, because you're a pioneer, right? You've been at this for so long at the very uh, initial beginning of all of this. So it'll be glorious for you and what you're doing. And of course, you have such a marvelous career. Okay, any final recommendations you want to leave the audience? And that's my last question.
I would just say that this is really the time from hype to reality, right? So let's think about that less as a hype. Let's think more in the real world, how we are going to work together on that and join us in those AI working group together. That's the reason we set them up. We want to hear more from people, practitioners, researchers, and even healthcare practitioners in the workflows directly. We want to have them work together in the new era to lead the effort. Don't let
Well,
machine lead you. We can still take that leadership right now, and let's do that now before it's too late.
well, that's a very good advice. And again, Sabrina, thank you for coming in and sharing so much of your expertise with our audience. You're just a really such a marvelous pioneering figure. You're continue doing wonderful global contributions. So thank you again for sharing so much.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.